The wind howled through the endless stretch of white, carrying with it the faint whisper of a storm that had no mercy left to give. Snowflakes, sharp as glass, whipped across the girl's face as she stumbled barefoot through the woods, her thin dress clinging to her trembling body. Her name was Ilara, and she had known hunger and hardship all her life, but never like this. Her breaths came out in quick, shallow bursts that faded into the icy air. Each step felt heavier than the last, her body crying for warmth that no longer existed. The world around her had turned into a white wilderness, unforgiving and cold, where even the sound of her own heartbeat seemed to be swallowed by the silence. She pressed a bundle close to her chest, a small, fragile baby wrapped in torn cloth, its faint cry almost lost to the wind. It was all she had left in the world. No family, no home. Just the child and a desperate will to keep it alive. Hours earlier, Ilara had fled from the small dying village she once called home. They said there was no place for her anymore, no food to spare, and no heart willing to take in a mother and her child. When her husband had died in the mines, the people turned their backs. And now as the storm descended upon her, she realized that maybe they never saw her as one of their own. Her body shivered uncontrollably. The baby's cries grew weaker and she tightened her hold. "Stay with me," she whispered through chattering teeth. The forest grew darker, the snow deeper. She reached the base of a large tree and collapsed, too weak to go any further. Her vision blurred. She could barely feel her fingers anymore. She leaned her head against the frozen bark and looked up at the gray sky. Memories flickered, laughter, warmth, the sound of music from her childhood. Now nothing but fading echoes swallowed by the storm. Her tears froze before they could fall. As the storm raged, the sound of distant hooves echoed faintly through the night. Faint, almost like an illusion. Ilara didn't notice at first. Her thoughts had drifted to somewhere between sleep and surrender. But fate wasn't done with her yet. Miles away, a rancher named Samuel rode through the blizzard with a lantern in hand. He had seen signs of tracks, leading from the old village road into the forest, footprints, small and scattered as if someone had been running for their life. He wasn't the kind of man to ignore that. The storm bit into his face as he urged his horse forward, calling out through the wind. But the night gave no answer. The flicker of his lantern cut through the darkness like a star struggling to survive, and then he saw it, a shape near a tree half covered in snow. He dismounted and ran forward, his boots crunching through the frost. It was her, a young woman pale as the snow itself, clutching something to her chest. For a terrifying moment he thought she was gone. He knelt beside her and felt for a pulse. It was faint, but it was there. He brushed the snow from her face, his breath visible in the cold air. "Hold on," he murmured, pulling off his heavy coat and wrapping it around her and the baby. The child stirred, letting out a weak cry and a sound that pierced his heart. Samuel looked around. They were miles from his ranch, and the storm was growing worse. He had no choice but to get her out of there. He lifted her gently, securing both her and the baby against his chest, and carried them to his horse. "You're safe now," he whispered, as he climbed into the saddle and turned toward the faint light of his homestead in the distance. Behind them, the snow continued to fall, erasing the footprints, erasing the past. Ahead, there was only a faint glimmer of hope. Back at the ranch, the fire burned bright, and Samuel's heart raced as he laid her on the bed near the hearth. He covered her in blankets and fed the baby warm milk from a bottle he quickly prepared. Hours passed before her eyes fluttered open, confusion filling them as she saw the man who had saved her life. She didn't speak at first. She couldn't. But when she looked at the baby, alive and safe, a single tear slipped down her cheek, a tear of gratitude, of disbelief, of hope reborn. She tried to speak, but her lips trembled too much to form words. Samuel just smiled softly and said again, "You're safe now." Outside, the storm began to ease, and for the first time in days, the dawn broke over the snow. The world, once so cold and cruel, now seemed to hold a quiet promise. The next morning, light poured through the frosted window, illuminating the small cabin with a soft golden glow. Ilara woke to the sound of crackling fire and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Her mind, still fogged from exhaustion, wandered between dream and reality. But then she saw the baby resting, peacefully in a woven basket near the fire, and remembered the storm, the forest, the man with the lantern. Samuel was sitting by the table, repairing a broken bridle strap, his face lined with quiet strength. When he saw her awake, he smiled, setting the leather aside. "You're safe now," he said again, his voice gentle but sure. as though those words themselves could mend the cracks in her soul. Ilara tried to sit up, but her body protested. He helped her with a cup of warm broth, and she whispered her thanks, her voice barely audible. The warmth spread through her, melting away the lingering numbness. Over the days that followed, Ilara learned about the man who had saved her. Samuel was a rancher who lived alone on the edge of the forest, tending to his horses and cattle after losing his family years before. Life had made him silent and solitary, but not cruel. There was kindness in his eyes, the kind born not from pity but understanding. He didn't ask her about her past at first. He only made sure she and the baby had food, warmth, and rest. But as the snow outside began to melt and spring whispered its arrival, Ilara slowly began to speak. She told him about her village, about the hunger that drove people to turn on each other, about her husband who had died in an accident, and how she had been cast out with her newborn child. Samuel listened without judgment, only nodding, his gaze steady and full of empathy. "You were meant to survive," he said finally. "And you did." One evening, as they sat by the fire, Ilara looked at him and asked, "Why did you help me?" He paused, staring into the flames. "Because once, someone found me in a storm and said, 'The same thing I said to you,'" he replied softly. "You're safe now." The fire crackled between them, filling the silence with warmth. From that night on, something changed. Not spoken, not rushed, but understood. They became each other's strength. Samuel taught her how to ride, how to tend the animals, and how to find peace in the rhythm of hard, honest work. And Ilara, with her quiet resilience, brought back laughter to the lonely ranch. The baby, now strong and full of life, became a symbol of everything they had both lost and found again: hope. Months passed, and the scars of winter faded into green fields and wildflowers. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, Samuel watched Ilara and the child playing near the stream, their laughter echoing through the valley. He realized that the storm had not just taken something from his life. It had brought something back, a reason to feel, to live, to believe in second chances. The girl who had once been left to die in the snow now stood strong beneath the sun, her heart no longer burdened by despair but filled with purpose. And as the days went on, the ranch became a home again, not just a shelter from the cold, but a place where broken souls found warmth. When the story of that night spread across the nearby towns, people whispered about the rancher who saved a poor girl from the snow, about how kindness could change the course of destiny. But Samuel and Ilara never sought recognition. They only knew that life, no matter how cruel, always leaves a light burning somewhere, if you're brave enough to keep walking toward it. And to everyone listening to this story right now, remember, hope survives even in the coldest storms. No matter how dark your nights get, there's always a dawn waiting. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that remind you miracles still happen and kindness still saves lives.